The snake is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree, and the audience delighted in seeing those bronze effigies beaten and battered. Shadow of the Erdtree is finally here, and this character called Messmer the Impaler is an inspiration from the great primordial snake god Neheb-Kau from Egyptian mythology, known as the Collector of Souls in classical antiquity. Neheb-Kau is considered a deity who may be befriended by gods and enlisted into service. After this transformation, he appears as a servant and partner to the sun god Re, who in Elden Ring is Godwyn, the scion of the Golden Bough, filled with a death blight awaiting his revival in the Land of Reeds, and Neheb-Kau is known to provide food and assistance to the deceased king in the afterlife. However, in the mythology, Neheb-Kau also gets increasingly more powerful and eventually assumes the sun god Re's role as the king of the sky, his other half, so to speak. This guy you're seeing right now is not just a servant of Godwyn, the sun god, but is intimately linked with Godwyn, as the Rune of Death is compartmentalized into two separate forms in the DLC. Do you remember how Fire Giants and Stormlord were the two pillar oppositions before Marika's Golden Order started and Elden Beast became the dominant theocracy in the realm? Post-shattering, the Outer God's power representing Fire Giants and Twinbird has been activated, so to speak, in the Land of Shadows. Messmer, Marika's former child, is representing the Fire Giant component, while Godwyn's deathroot is representing the Stormlord, more precisely the Twinbird component, but they're representing the exact same idea. Together, they form the complete Rune of Death, with its red and dark. The era preceding Marika's order, the forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation. Moreover, do you guys remember the Butterfly trilogy that was symbolizing Marika's demigods with Radagon? Although Melina and Smoldering Butterfly connection was very well established, I think a recontextualization is in order, because I have reasons to believe Melina is Marika what Millicent was to Melania, a sprouting bud, so to speak. So this creates the possibility that Messmer was the fire giant child of Marika and Radagon, symbolizing the smoldering butterfly, as Radagon is already made to be heavily linked with the fire giants on the evolutionary timeline, with being ashamed and disgusted with his red locks, Messmer's fire giant powers, and red hair in the trailer. In fact, this explains how Messmer was one of the unwanted soulless demigods of Marika wandering in the mausoleums, as both the symbol of snake and fire is antithetical to the foundation of the Erdtree and the Golden Order. There are legitimate reasons to be ashamed of Messmer on an intrinsic level. When Radagon and Marika birthed Messmer as a smoldering butterfly completing the M trilogy, not only he was one of the sacrificed demigods on the Night of the Black Knives, explaining why he's one of the lords of the Shadow Realm, but also explaining why Radagon was disgusted with his red hair and fire giant origins. That's why Messmer was sacrificed on the Night of the Black Knives. Now, whether the plan was hijacked by Ranni similar to Godwyn is a topic for another video, but keep in mind that this is a very valuable line of investigation. Miyazaki in his interview said, "Yes, we can speak to this character a little bit. This is, as you say, a key figure of this DLC. We believe he will be officially revealed to be Messmer by the time the trailer goes live and has this important element of shadow to him." And you may have seen at the end of the trailer, there was this piece of key art where it shows Messmer sat in his throne-like chair, and people who have played the game may recognize this throne to be one of those from the boss room where you battle Morgod, and this represents the thrones at the base of the Erdtree, and it's supposed to symbolize the Messmer stands on an equal footing to these other demigods and children of Marika, who sat around in these thrones and held the rooms of the Erdtree. Miyazaki is basically confirming Messmer the Impaler to be Marika's child, which leads to my Mausoleum Demigods prediction regarding the soulless children of Marika being the primary boss fights in the DLC. Speaking of which, Miyazaki also said this: "You will be heading to the DLC from the cocoon in Mohg's boss room. In order to access the DLC, you need to defeat Mohg Lord of Blood and Radagon Starbreaker." Now, Mohg is preventing access to Miquella's cocoon, that much is obvious. But why would Radagon be required to access the DLC? That's a random statement from Miyazaki, right? No, you would be wrong, as I've already predicted before the release of the DLC trailer how Radagon is absolutely essential for Miquella's plans of Eclipse, as Radagon is sealing the movements of the stars, and that's why he ordered Malenia to defeat Radagon in the trailers. The full logic is explained in my DLC prediction video. We've observed the red color in Maliketh's boss fight. We also see that red shard of death stepped into Marika's womb by the greater will. Remember how Miquella desires to give Godwyn a true death in his golden epitaph. A lot of demigods have been killed on the Night of the Black Knives, but Godwyn and Messmer, representing the two assassinated demigods that night, two halves of the Rune of Death, are, at least thematically speaking, very similar to Darien and Devon. They inhabit the two inseparable sides, Fire Giants and Twinbird, which is why Messmer refers to his mother as Marika directly in the trailer.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
What he means here is how Marika, his mother, can allow lordship of us, the Tarnished, who is an ally of Miquella but not himself. Remember how all the demigods were fighting to become Elden Lord in the very beginning of the game, before Greater Will was disappointed and lended the grace back to the Tarnished. In other words, the demigods other than the three known Empyreans, Ranni, Miquella, and Malenia, would all be competing for the seat of Elden Lord. If Godwyn wasn't assassinated by Ranni previously, he would also be a part of this competition. Similarly, Messmer would be too. Messmer and Godwyn would desire the alliance of Miquella for the flourishing of deathroot and the giant fire god, corrupting the shadow of the Erdtree. As alluded by the trailer and my previous DLC analysis, Miquella will be an ally of the Tarnished when all is said and done. This explains Mother would still truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light. Sanction means giving permission and approval, and bereft means lacking. Marika, how could you allow the Tarnished to become Elden Lord when he's lacking the light of gold? Referring how he himself, as a forsaken child of Marika, embodies that light intrinsically with the Elden Ring shard, while the Tarnished is bereft of it. This is very important because we already know how sorrowful Marika was when Mohg kidnapped Miquella. And most importantly, cut content regarding how Radagon viewed Miquella as the recipient of the vision makes this even clearer. This is previously only referred to the vision's vessel Marika, implying how post-shattering the plans of Miquella's ascension to the golden lineage has been cooking in the background. In fact, this was the entire point of the shattering. And it is no wonder Messmer and even Godwyn himself, which we haven't seen in this trailer, would be jealous of us as the Tarnished, how privileged of a position we're in. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the very beginning of the trailer where the narrator says,
pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
In my two in-depth Miquella videos, I have been perfectly clear on the fact that Miquella is a fundamentally benevolent character. Even if Miyazaki decided to create a Miquella boss fight to get his great rune, it would be a temporary corrupt form at best, and afterwards Miquella would revert back to his inherently benevolent form, as the principles of Golden Order fundamentalism would make the idea of Miquella being inherently evil an impossibility. The law of regression and causality are spiritual and psychologically profound ideas that informs Miquella's education. His consequent alchemical practice of ever-pure conception of unalloyed gold is not declaring a rejection of Radagon's teachings, but is the next evolution as the theory is directly put into practice. Miquella was so influenced by regression and causality that, pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There's nothing more terrifying. using unconditional love to disarm your opponents, to kill them with kindness, as they say. And that's why there's nothing more terrifying. We see how Miquella still maintains his father's principles, as Golden Epitaph is showing the Golden Order totality gesture, the same symbol his father Radagon, the pioneer of fundamentalism, is a proponent of, as observed by his statue. Miquella attempted to perfect Radagon's foundations, which means everyone who said Miquella was going to be an evil character similar to Griffith were wrong, and the hints already existed in the base game. Bewitching Branch item description on its own was simply not sufficient evidence, as I already said in my prediction video. Now in this frame, if we stop it right here, this hint was already given. These spiritual graves are giving the backdrop of the land we're in, the afterlife, the shadow plucked from the Golden Order, Godwyn's Deathblight and Messmer's Fireflame. And Miyazaki says that this Shadowland is occurring in the same space that lands between occupy. There is no timeline shift, no nothing. This is the land of death simultaneously occurring with the base game. The shadow plucked from the Golden Order. It is not separate from the Golden Order, but also not the same as lands between. It's an inseparable metaphysical extension of it. Miyazaki says in terms of setting and themes, it technically occupies the same space as the lands between, but due to something story related we can't reveal today, this has become physically disconnected, and you will travel to the shadow of the Erdtree as a separate place. Speaking of which, if you look closer at the substance dripping from the Erdtree, you will see that it's not necessarily pure yellow, but it has a tinge of redness within it. As Ordovis's Great Sword puts it, the red tint exemplifies the nature of primordial gold, said to be close in nature to life itself. This fundamental life force is slipping through the cracks of the deathroot corrupted shadow tree, meaning if Godwyn's deathroot was cleaned with Miquella's love, so to speak, what would remain would be a golden tree with a red tinged color, alluding to the primordial gold referred to in the Ordovis's sword, and rubido in alchemical stages of ever purer conception of unalloyed gold. As Miyazaki said, in the concept art release, the shadow of the golden tree is known as the shadow tree. The subtitle has a slightly more hidden meaning, but I would like you to experience that by actually playing the game. That hidden meaning Miyazaki alludes to is related to the Crucible timeline of Elden Ring, one of the ancient Erdtree incantations. This is a manifestation of the Erdtree's primal vital energies, an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together. See, Crucible Era refers to a timeline in the game that is, inherently speaking, primordial. The problem with the Erdtree in the base game is that its ancient Erdtree seal is completely powerless in boosting these Crucible incantations. All the other seals in the game boost its respective branches, whereas the Erdtree seal boosts none of the ancient Erdtree incantations. In fact, From Software is so adamant of its uselessness that it doesn't even refer to any spells. A formless sacred seal decorated with an Erdtree crest, once the focus of religion in the lands between. Even though the Elden Ring is shattered and the Erdtree has dulled from its former radiance, earnest faith continues to hold the answers. I suggest to you that hope is residing in this DLC, as Miquella will perfect the Golden Order with his unalloyed gold. Moreover, no seal currently exists in the game boosting the primordial crucible where all life was blended together. These ancient Erdtree incantations does not get boosted by the Erdtree seal, but with the red tinge of primordial gold observed seeping out through the cracks of the shadow Erdtree, now that might hold the answer. How the Gold Road ancient seal depicted on the tiles of the lands between, predating even the timeline of Far Mazula, will be the seal that will finally boost these Crucible incantations. Because the true source of the Crucible lies in the red tinge of gold, outside the confines of America's order. How we're talking about a realm beyond the purview of the Erdtree. Now let's talk about this great rune here. Not only the color gives it away, but so does the design. This rune looks awfully similar to Malenia's rune because it is Miquella's rune. The blessings of this half-rooted rune reduces the healing power of the tears, sisters born from an inseparable fate. Now this actually means, as a possibility, Malenia might make an appearance as an ally in the DLC. But that's a separate episode I'll go deeper into. What you see here in this section is Miquella's guidance. We will trace his steps in the Land of Shadow, and as a shard bearer we will try to find Miquella.
In that forsaken place, blood must spill.
Let's stop here because the reason why the blood must spill in the Forsaken Land is true both metaphorically and literally. Just like how Mohg was trying to imbue Miquella with his blood, blood is needed for the final stage of unalloyed gold to be perfected in alchemy.
Blood of your fellows? The Erdtree faithful.
The blood of your fellows, the Erdtree faithful, is referring to the people who are faithful to the Erdtree, as can be seen in the portrait. The Golden Order's blood needs to be spilled. I'll tell you who these people are soon once I lay down the foundation, so bear with me, we'll circle back to this portrait. Now this scene confirms how a poison or deathblight swamp will confront us in the DLC. Just like in Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls, if these are made with a solid level design in mind, they're always really fun and memorable for me. This shot is the Tarnished walking down a cave filled with warrior jars that's set to carry the corpses of fallen warriors of the Golden Order. Maybe these are harkening back to the Erdtree burials in the times of war, where no land was suitable to bury the dead, and they were temporarily stored in these warrior jars. Now this shot is confirming the thematic connective tissue of Messmer's fire giant origins with an appropriate level design with lava and fire. I really wonder what Messmer's Great Rune will do as a buff. Now this shot is very interesting because it is showing thematic similarities to Fire Mazula in the base game. Not just with the floating buildings and structures crumbling, but also the hawks flying around the place harkening back to Stormwhale in the base game. Remember how Godwyn's face resides at the base of the Stormwhale, and Stormlord used to be the king of this era before Marika's Golden Order. Twinbird of Nigredo referred to this in the Twinbird kite shield might be the god Placidusax was awaiting its return in the base game. This place can be the remaining section of the Stormwhale in the base game, relating intimately to the Fire Mazula with the Hawks and the Twinbird. Now, this trailer focused more on the Fire Giant angle of the Rune of Death, and I presume the next trailer will spend more time exploring the Stormlord, Twinbird, and Godwyn angle of the Rune of Death. That's my hypothesis. Messmer the Impaler is only the half of the story.
They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
This line refers to fire giants of the past and shows a fire-imbued weapon used in the war. This machine was set to gather the remains of bodies and use it as fuel. This worm here has a connection to the story Miyazaki doesn't want to spoil for us. The interviewer asks what the deal is with this terrifying worm that eats people. It's hard to talk about some of these enemies without spoiling anything, but there's a significant connection between these enemies, the way they are, and the Land of Shadow. Now, what is the connection Miyazaki is referring to? Worm faces are very interesting because the connection is leading to Deathblight and Godwyn. See, in the evolutionary timeline, taking into account their humanoid ears, once chimeric and disgusting, align with the Shadow Tree, become disfigured and defiled by Godwyn's deathroot, unable to continue their evolution. After all, the worm faces can cause Deathblight, which itself summons deathroot, and that is intimately connected to Godwyn the Golden, whom this trailer didn't really focus on, but Miyazaki doesn't really want to spoil the surprise for us just yet. Now this foot looks strikingly similar to another demigod we faced in the game, but don't worry, I'm not gonna say this is Marika's child because it is not. At least not this particular dancing lion. This is a boss fight that is predating the Erdtree, a monster that existed and is heavily related to the Crucible era. Miyazaki says, yes, the dancing lion in a sense is a DLC boss. In fact, the Land of Shadows is the place where Marika became a god and the Golden Tree was born. Naturally, there was a culture that existed before the Golden Tree, and the dancing lion is derived from that culture. So I hope you feel the scent of a different culture which is a little different from the main story. Miyazaki has specifically regarded this boss enemy as pre-Erdtree. I want you to pay attention to the horns that he's imbued with. These are literally the horns of the Crucible. This is the reason the Crucible incantations does not work with the Erdtree seal, because the Crucible predates the Erdtree. Just like this monster, horns, wings, tails, these are symbolizing the era before Elden Beast's arrival to the lands between. The Crucible truly is the period of time where everything was once blended together. Looking at the teeth of misbegottens and comparing with this lion monster predating the Erdtree, its evolutionary origin might be similar. Meaning misbegottens, this monster and the beastmen of Pharmazula, who we know in this context to predate the Erdtree, as they also embody fur, wings, horns, and similar characteristics along with dragons and deathbirds. Do you remember how I told you America's soulless demigods are residing in mausoleums and they will be the boss fights in the DLC? Well, it looks like there will be more than 10 boss fights in the DLC, including side bosses like this. There are 7 mausoleum buildings, meaning there will be at least 7 main boss fights. And in this shot, pay attention to the boss room door, making this enemy either a mini-boss or someone more important. Honestly, for me, it is good to know we'll experience so much variety of bosses in a DLC, one of which Miyazaki confirmed to be as challenging as Millennia, if not more. As challenging as Millennia, if not more.
I'm pressing control.
This part illustrates how Miyazaki says there will be 8 new types of weapons introduced in the DLC. I'm personally excited to try them all in combination, see how fresh they feel, which is ironic because Elden Ring has such a variety of weapons already. I have countless weapons in my inventory waiting to be experimented. So Miyazaki didn't even really need to add these 8 new weapon types, but I'll take whatever I can get. This game is absolutely incredible on all fronts. Now this part looks absolutely beautiful, and it's very cool because it reminded me of the Blue Dancer Talisman with how the woman is moving, so I'm assuming this is the Red Dancer who will give us her talisman. Blue Dancer Talisman in the base game was very much associated with water and Millennia's teachings of the Blind Swordsman, and it's very thematically congruent that maybe with Messmer's Fire Giant origins, this Red Dancer symbolizes that red flame. That would be a really cool connection. Imagine we'll see the Blind Swordsman somewhere in these fields. That would be absolutely insane. In here we see a big rhino that sprouts horns, strengthening the connection of the Crucible era being tied to these beasts. Now this guy on the other hand looks to me like Nox, Eternal City's silver themed enemy. We'll see what his angle is eventually. This area looks to me like it's a location that we'll explore with Saint Trina in mind. And now we get to the insane part of the trailer, not appreciated by most people. See, when we look at Miquella at the end of the trailer in his adult form, perfectly clean and beautiful, you might completely discount the possibility. As evident by the body hidden in the cocoon in Godwyn's palace, which we know for a fact to be Miquella, looks like this. And since we do follow up on the Great Runes trail, this confirms that the Miquella we see at the end of the trailer is Miquella after we gather his shard, while this is his shard bearer form before we've gathered his Great Rune. This is how the shard of the Elden Ring had bastardized Miquella's form post-shattering. And this is the exact same old man we've seen in the painting before. Not just in the painting, but also in the Godwyn's palace. After we find Miquella, we'll have a boss fight with him to extract his Great Rune, so that he becomes that woman. as the shards of the Elden Ring is what changes the forms of the demigods post-shattering. Radagon wasn't always a giant, nor Rykard this abomination of a serpent. Similarly, the form Miquella has taken post-shattering is also evident in his cocoon, also in this portrait. They're the same. And the beautiful lady form of Miquella that we've seen at the end of the trailer can only arise when the shards of the Elden Ring no longer manipulate the young Empyrean's physical body. It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things golden, until his lordship arrives and frees him. In the land of shadow, Miquella awaits the return of his promised lord. And his promised lord is referring to us, the Tarnished, so that we can help him out. I've explained the promised part of the sentence in my Demigods vs Tarnished video, how this plan was set in motion by Marika herself. Our lordship as the Tarnished was designed to serve Miquella, no one else. Now let's circle back to the portrait. You might mistakenly assume at a first glance that this is Marika and his father, maybe inside the headquarters of Golden Order troops preparing for battle against the fire giants. A reference to that historical period. Although this sounds good on paper, the woman here is black-haired. You can still make the argument, what if Marika had black hair before the Erdtree's birth? Well, we can explore that. It is possible Marika, in her black hair form, might have spread her bud, similar to how Melania did with Millicent. The red-haired Melania was born in this manner, and this left herself as the white-haired Marika we know. And Melania was the one who interacted with the Giant's Forge to appease the Giant's flame before the birth of the Erdtree. Now, I would agree with the last part of this argument, and we'll delve deeper into that in another episode, but I don't think this black-haired woman is Marika. Here's why. This old man we see in the painting is the exact same guy we see in the trailer. Look at the same brooch they're wearing. And we've already established how this is Miquella's corrupted shard-bearer form post-shattering. This means the identity of this black-haired woman is probably the one sitting on the throne. The Erdtree faithful as it's written along with Miquella. It cannot be a historical reference to Marika's previous form or some other timeline. Now, whomever this person is, she must have worked with Miquella in the Land of Shadows until our arrival. And this location she inhabits must be our headquarters in the DLC, a sanctuary for the Tarnished, similar to the Round Table Hold in the base game. Also, motifs of purple flame and the brooch in Miquella's clothes all harken back to Saint Trina's torch and symbolism, strengthening the connection. This is referring to how Bandai Namco says Miquella being divested of himself of all things golden. Messmer the Impaler is taunting Miquella's Elden Lord the Tarnished, how he, as Marika's child, should have been the Elden Lord, not the Tarnished. The story not just follows Miquella but will also expand on Marika's past after she arrives on the lands between. Miyazaki says another axis of the story is Queen Marika and what she did in the Land of Shadow and what led Miquella to follow her there. I think the past of Land of Shadows and Queen Marika would be told in the same way as the history of the Shattered War in the main story. This means just like we learned the history of the lands between with stone writings and indirectly via melanin grace points, we'll also learn more about Queen Marika's past in this DLC. Finally, Miquella is cleaning the deathroot corrupted Erdtree presumably at the end of the DLC when all is said and done. I think this is also a nice segue to Godwyn, Stormlords, Dragons, Deathroot, and Twinbird, which will hopefully get more screen time in the following trailers, exploring all the components of the Rune of Death. Now, these yellow Crucible Erdtree wings and the red tinge of Destined Deathflame shown in this manner is really thematic of the main opposition in my eyes. How the life-reinforcing Golden Order is opposing its shadow primordial counterpart, Death, in this DLC. Now, even if Miyazaki showed these in the trailer, you may still be confused about the Deathroot angle in the DLC. You can freshen up on the lore with my Farm Azula episode here in preparation for the DLC. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.